Dawn broke over Elkridge, a small town tucked along the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. Golden light pierced the thick morning mist, casting a glow over the cobbled walkway leading to the local police station. From an old Ford sedan, a middle-aged black man stepped out. He wore a plaid shirt, faded jeans, and worn sneakers. No one would guess he had spent over 20 years in law enforcement. His name was Malcolm Rivers, and today he was Elkridge's new police chief. Malcolm hadn't come for a warm welcome. He came to observe quietly. The department had long been whispered about: abuse of power, racism, and a chilling code of silence. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, not through polished reports. No one recognized him. His appointment had only been quietly announced a few days earlier, and that anonymity would become the key to a shocking revelation. Malcolm crossed the parking lot of the precinct. Officers in uniform chatted casually, smoking cigarettes and swapping jokes. No one paid attention to the plainly dressed man walking by. That's exactly what Malcolm wanted. He needed to know how they behaved when no one was watching, but he didn't expect to become a target so quickly. A voice called out behind him, "Hey, you lost, old man." Malcolm turned to see a tall, cocky white officer approaching. The name tag read Officer Trent Maddox. A few others leaned against the wall, arms folded, waiting for entertainment. "This isn't a shelter," Maddox sneered. "You should know where you belong." Malcolm said nothing. He wanted to see how far they'd go. "You deaf or something?" Maddox stepped in close, then suddenly spat directly into Malcolm's face. The atmosphere froze. Chuckles echoed nearby. Malcolm stood still, wiping his face with a handkerchief. He said nothing, but in his eyes, a fire had been lit. Malcolm turned away, offering no retaliation, no threats. He locked eyes with Maddox for just 2 seconds, long enough to make the officer falter, then walked on. He hadn't come to explode. He came to clean house, and the first test had arrived on its own. He walked purposefully through the main corridor of the station. The smell of stale coffee, the clacking of keyboards, and the hum of conversation made up the usual office noise. But to Malcolm, this was a stage, and the performance was about to reach its climax. Through the frosted glass of the briefing room, he saw officers gathering with their coffee, unaware of what was coming. He opened his briefcase and pulled out his appointment documents, stamped with the mayor's seal. Then he stepped through a side door behind the curtain. At the front, Captain Lawrence Dillard clapped to gather attention. "We've got an important moment this morning. Chief Caldwell's replacement has finally arrived." Malcolm waited silently behind the curtain, his face no longer patient. The show was about to begin. "Everyone, please welcome," Dillard announced, "the new leader of the Elkridge Police Department, Chief Malcolm Rivers." All eyes turned as Malcolm stepped forward. The silence was suffocating. Maddox stood frozen, color draining from his face. The officers who had laughed earlier now lowered their heads in shame. Malcolm opened the folder, placed it on the podium, and scanned the room before speaking. "This morning I arrived and none of you recognized me. That was intentional. I wanted to see the department for what it truly is, not through handshakes and PowerPoints." He paused, then looked directly at Maddox. "I was mocked, disrespected, spat on. Not because I did something wrong, but because I looked different." No one dared laugh. No one dared breathe. In that moment, Malcolm Rivers turned a hallway full of prejudice into a courtroom of truth. Malcolm's voice sharpened. "The disrespect I saw this morning wasn't just toward me. It was toward the badge you wear, the oath you swore, the community we're sworn to protect." Maddox tried to step back, but no one followed his lead. No one laughed with him now. "I didn't come here to make friends," Malcolm continued. "I came to root out the rot that's been allowed to grow in this building." Then he pointed straight at Maddox. "And that begins with you." Turning to Captain Dillard, he declared, "Effective immediately, Officer Trent Maddox is suspended. A full internal investigation will begin today." A wave of gas swept across the room. Maddox turned crimson, his jaw tight, eyes darting for an ally, but found none. Malcolm stepped away from the podium. He didn't need to shout. The silence said it all. After the meeting, the precinct felt unnaturally quiet. No chatter, no stomping boots. Malcolm sat in his new office, gazing out through the glass. Just hours earlier, That hallway had humiliated him. Now, it was his command. The phone rang. It was Captain Dillard. "Chief, I just wanted to say, you handled that better than anyone I've seen in years." Malcolm didn't care for compliments. "I need every complaint ever filed against Maddox. All of them. Even the ones that got buried," he said. "And the names of anyone who gave a statement, then retracted it." "Understood," Dillard replied, though there was hesitation in his voice. Malcolm hung up. He knew this was only the beginning. Elkridge didn't just have a Maddox problem. There were others wearing the same uniform who believed the rules didn't apply to them. But he also knew, when the right fire burns long enough, darkness always retreats. Within days, word spread through Elkridge like wildfire. A cop had spat on the new chief and been suspended. The story hit cafes, barbershops, and churches across town. What shocked people most? No one stepped up to defend Officer Maddox. Malcolm moved through the station halls calmly. Officers now nodded or muttered, "Sir," but their eyes still hadn't changed. Some were afraid, some angry, but a few were beginning to reflect. In the briefing room, Maddox's file lay wide open. 3 complaints for excessive force, 2 for racial slurs, and a suspicious equipment malfunction during a civilian complaint. Everyone had been inconclusive. Malcolm read them slowly, face tight with disappointment, but not surprise. This was exactly why he had come. And he knew, if this culture wasn't dismantled from its roots, the mask would stay on forever. He cracked a cold smile. Time to rip them off, one by one. Midweek, as Malcolm finalized a new internal conduct memo, a soft knock hit his door. "Chief, I'm Officer Anya Torres. I need to talk." He motioned her in. Anya's voice shook. "I saw Maddox assault a suspect in the interview room. I tried to report it, but Deputy Chief Grant warned me not to." Malcolm's eyes darkened. Grant Matthews, Caldwell's former right-hand man. His name had come up too often in whispers. Stern but effective, they called him. "Would you be willing to give a statement now?" Malcolm asked. Torres nodded, eyes filled with quiet fire. "I've stayed silent long enough." He jotted it down, then said softly, "You just did the bravest thing I've seen today." But in his mind, alarms were sounding. If Grant was covering up Maddox's crimes, then Maddox was just the tip of the iceberg, and what lay beneath might be far more dangerous. Malcolm didn't wait. He authorized a full internal probe, this time with oversight from a neutral third party. Meanwhile, security teams combed through Deputy Chief Grant's files, emails, and access logs. What they found chilled him. Suppressed complaints, altered witness statements, lost body cam footage. Every thread of misconduct led back to the same source. A ring of officers protecting one another, coordinated by Grant. In a closed meeting with the mayor and city legal advisor, Malcolm laid out everything. Though skeptical at first, they couldn't deny the evidence. "You want me to sign a suspension order for your own deputy chief?" the mayor asked. Malcolm didn't flinch. "No one is above justice, not even him." The order was signed that night. By morning, Grant Matthews was placed on temporary leave, and the real storm had just begun. News of the investigation swept through Elkridge. The town split. Some praised Malcolm's courage. Others accused him of tearing apart their trusted institution. Online forums buzzed. One comment read, "Finally someone's cleaning house." Another, "This outsider's destroying everything we've built." Malcolm ignored the noise. He focused on action. Officer Torres became a quiet symbol of bravery. Other young officers, once afraid to speak, began knocking on his door. A flicker of change had sparked, but in the shadows, resistance brewed. On his desk one morning, Malcolm found an unmarked envelope. Inside, a photo of his family, taken from disturbingly close. He stared at it, eyes narrowing. He understood then, cleaning out a toxic culture would come with a price. Malcolm stared at the photo, his wife and daughter walking home, clearly unaware someone was watching them. His grip tightened. He had seen threats before, but never like this. This wasn't just resistance, it was desperation. He called in Officer Torres. "Has anyone acted strange lately? Unusual shifts? Restricted file access?" She nodded. 2 officers, Wendell and Crane. They've been whispering with Grant before and after his suspension. Malcolm quietly flagged them for surveillance. He wasn't about to accuse without proof, but he wouldn't wait to be blindsided either. Later that night, at home, he held his daughter close and warned his wife to be cautious. "It might get uglier before it gets better," he said, voice low. "I knew who I married," she replied, eyes firm. "You do what's right. We'll be okay." That night, Malcolm sat in the dark with only the glow of his desk lamp. The system was fighting back. But so would he. 2 days later, Malcolm's persistence bore fruit. IT investigators retrieved a deleted body cam file, hidden deep in the system's archive. The footage showed Maddox in an interrogation room with a young black man in cuffs. Maddox slammed the man against the wall and laughed. The timestamp matched one of the unfounded complaints. Malcolm called Officer Torres to view it with him. As the tape played, her face grew pale. This was the day I almost came forward," she whispered. "Grant told me to let it go or risk my badge." Malcolm forwarded the footage directly to the mayor and the Civilian Oversight Board. No more speculation, no more excuses. This was evidence. He then prepared a press statement, not to expose the scandal to the public yet, but to let the department know the walls were closing in. "From today forward," he wrote, "we will no longer bury the truth to protect the guilty." It wasn't just Maddox on trial now. It was the entire code of silence that had shielded him for years. The following morning, Malcolm entered the main squad room. Conversation stopped. Eyes followed him. He called out, "Officers Wendell and Crane, my office." Now, inside, the tension was thick. "You've been monitoring me," Wendell blurted. "That's illegal." Malcolm didn't flinch. "You've been leaking information to a suspended officer. That's a felony." Crane shifted uncomfortably. "We were just keeping in touch." Malcolm slid the printed email logs across the desk. "Touching base? Or trying to cover up a history of abuse?" Wendell's jaw clenched. "This department was running just fine before you got here." "No," Malcolm replied calmly. "It was surviving on fear and silence. I didn't come here to preserve that. I came to end it." He handed each of them a sealed envelope. "You're both under administrative review. Effective immediately. Badges and weapons. Now." Neither moved at first, but the silence in the hall grew louder. Other officers began peeking through the windows. Crane finally unhooked his badge. Wendell followed, albeit with a look of pure venom. Malcolm watched them leave. Another wall had just cracked. That weekend, Malcolm attended a town hall meeting at Elk Ridge's local rec center. He expected tension, but what he found surprised him. Over 100 residents had gathered. Black, white, Latino, young and old. Some looked skeptical, others looked hopeful. One older woman stood and said, "I've lived here 50 years. First time I've seen a cop punished for what they did." A young man raised his hand. "Are we safe to speak now?" Malcolm nodded. "This room belongs to you." Voices rose. Stories poured out. Neighbors harassed. Teenagers wrongly detained. Complaints never acknowledged. Then a teenage boy stood. "Chief Rivers," he said nervously, "my brother was arrested by Maddox last year. They said he resisted, but he came home with bruises." Malcolm stepped forward. "What's your brother's name?" The boy answered. Malcolm jotted it down. "We'll look into it. You have my word." A hush fell. For the first time in years, people believed that justice might actually be listening. Outside, Malcolm stood under the night sky. He smiled, not because the fight was over, but because hope had finally entered the room. Back at the station, Malcolm received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was raspy, cautious. "Chief Rivers, this is Isaiah Moore, retired sergeant, 30 years ago." Malcolm sat up straight. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" "I heard what you're doing. I tried to change this place once. Got run out. Thought it would never happen. But now, maybe it can." Isaiah paused. "I've got boxes, old files, records I kept, names, timelines, even Grant's early reports. Some of it never made it into official archives." Malcolm blinked. "Why keep it all these years?" "I guess I was waiting for someone like you," Isaiah said quietly. "You still want a clean house?" Absolutely. Then you'd better come see what's in these boxes. And bring a flashlight. Some of it's dark. Later that night, Malcolm drove into the hills to meet the man. What he discovered would change everything. Not just about Grant and Maddox, but about the very roots of Elkridge's law enforcement legacy. Isaiah's garage was dusty, filled with forgotten decades. But in a locked trunk, he revealed everything. Memos from officers who were forced out, copies of complaints that mysteriously vanished, and even an old logbook that chronicled beatings and intimidation tactics used during the 90s. Back then, Isaiah said, you either joined the culture or you got erased. Malcolm flipped through the pages. Some of the names were still active. Some held rank. He saw photos of younger Grant Matthews posing with other officers long since retired, but the resemblance to present corruption was unmistakable. These files, Malcolm murmured, they'll reopen cases. Isaiah nodded. I hope they bury the right people this time. With the documents secured, Malcolm knew this was no longer just about fixing a precinct. It was about redeeming a town's soul. The ghosts of the past had finally been called to testify, and Malcolm would be their voice. Malcolm spent the next week building what he called the Reckoning Report, a comprehensive summary of past abuse, current corruption, and the culture that had enabled it. He sent copies to the state attorney's office, the mayor, and the civilian review board. One by one, resignations began. Officers who feared what else might surface quietly stepped down. Meanwhile, Malcolm began holding community forums monthly. Officers were now required to attend, not to patrol, but to listen. Officer Torres took the lead on new training modules around de-escalation, implicit bias, and accountability. She became a symbol of what courage looked like on the inside. Still, Malcolm knew some would never change, but he no longer needed all of them to change, just enough to flip the balance. He looked at a photo on his desk, his daughter smiling at her science fair. That's who this was for, not to fix the past, but to protect the future. When Grant Matthews was summoned to face the review board, he didn't wear his uniform. He wore a suit, one that fit like armor. The evidence was presented: altered reports, suppressed footage, internal cover-ups. Grant tried to deny, but Malcolm played the recording. Grant's own voice warning Torres to drop it or lose her badge. There was no coming back from that. I built this department, Grant snapped. You think you're saving it? You're tearing it apart. Malcolm stood slowly. No, Grant. I'm saving it from what you turned it into. The board ruled unanimously. Grant Matthews was terminated and referred for criminal prosecution. The next morning, the department was quiet. Officers walked differently, a little slower, a little more aware. The mountain had finally moved. 1 year later, the Elkridge Police Department looked nothing like before. Out of 73 officers, 19 had resigned or been dismissed. In their place came recruits who valued community, not intimidation. Malcolm stood at the front of a classroom, addressing a new academy class. If you're here to bully people, turn in your badge now. If you're here to protect and serve, truly serve, then welcome home. Officer Torres was now lieutenant, leading mentorship programs. Community complaints had dropped 70%. Trust, once shattered, was slowly rebuilding. At a public ceremony, the mayor unveiled a new plaque. To those who stood when silence was easier. Malcolm didn't want applause, but as his name was called and the crowd stood, he allowed himself a rare smile. Change had come to Elkridge, and it started with a man in worn-out sneakers and a storm in his heart. That evening, Malcolm walked alone through the same parking lot where it all began. The sky was clear. The station lights glowed warmly behind him. A young recruit jogging by paused and saluted. Evening, Chief. Malcolm nodded. Evening, officer. He reached the steps, paused, and looked back. From this spot, a man had once spat on him, laughed at him, believed he was nothing. But Malcolm had known who he was, and more importantly, what he stood for. He opened the precinct doors. Inside, officers were chatting, working, helping civilians. No laughter at someone's expense. No hidden sneers, just purpose. He whispered to himself, worth every fight. Then walked in, ready to begin again. The story conveys powerful lessons about integrity, courage, and human worth. It reminds us not to judge others by appearances, as character matters more than status. Toxic culture thrives when good people remain silent, but it only takes one brave voice to spark change. Justice spares no one, and true leadership doesn't require authority, only courage and integrity. Change often meets resistance, but silence is what truly feeds the darkness. Ultimately, lasting reform begins in the heart, and only bold, compassionate action can make it ripple through an entire community.